Good afternoon. We'll now call the meeting of the Waco City Council acting as the Budget and Audit Committee to order at 1:34 p.m. on October 13th, 2020. Joining me today online are Mayor Pro Tem Andrea Bearfield, Councilmember Hector Sabito, Councilmember John Kennard, Councilmember Darius Ewing, Councilmember Jim Holmes. On March 16th, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to a state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16, 2020 until further notice or until the state of disaster declaration expires. In accordance with physical distancing guidelines and while providing as much transparency as possible, this meeting will not be open to the public. This meeting is being broadcast live at wccc.tv. The audio is also being recorded. The video and audio recordings will be available to the public. According to the governor and attorney general, statutes that may require face-to-face interaction between members of the public and public officials are suspended, provided, however, that the governmental body offers alternative methods of communication with public officials. This includes public comment on agenda items. In an effort to allow for as much public input as possible, those who wish to submit their items, their written comments on a listed agenda item were asked to submit their comments to the city secretary's office by 11 a.m. today. Esmeralda, we did not receive any comments. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Our first item of business is to approve the September 8th, 2020 Budget and Audit Committee meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved as printed, and we will move to our first discussion item, and I'll let Bradley introduce it.
Thanks, Mayor. Welcome, Council. The first item is going to be a discussion of fiscal year 1920 financial audit with JRBT and staff, and as you're well aware, it's that time of year that we bring in today Katie King joining us virtually. She's Senior Audit Manager from JRBT, and she'll be talking about our proposed audit and the timeline associated with it. Katie?
Hello, good afternoon. How are y'all doing?
Great. Hi, Katie.
I'm going to try to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Can you see that presentation?
We can.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate y'all giving us the opportunity to speak on the audit. It's hard to believe it's already here. This year has flown by with a shortage of unusual activity. I wanted to just take a minute and walk through what you can expect for this year's audit. We'll talk through the scope and objectives of services, your engagement team, interim test planning, estimated report timing, and then some new accounting or auditing standards that are on the horizon. For starters, this is very consistent year over year, but for the benefit of any new members in attendance, we do issue an audit on the basic financial statements for the year end September 30th, 2020. We also do compliance work, first of all, under uniform guidance. We'll talk about that more as we present an update in December as to which programs that will entail for the year, but that is required because the city spends more than $750,000 a year in both federal and state programming. And then we do compliance work around the passenger facility charges that are received by the airport. And then we have agreed upon procedures that we do to file with TCEQ related to required landfill reporting. Your engagement team for the year, Diana Ward remains the audit partner. She'll be back in December to help with that presentation update. And then we have a concurring reviewer, Christy Davis, who's been doing that work for a couple of years as well. So she's very familiar with the city, but she provides a second quality check over the CAFR before it's released. And then I return as your senior manager. So in terms of interim test planning, just to give you an idea of what we do at the start, we do a risk assessment at the beginning of the year, understand what's been going on in the city's environment, any changes in controls or processes. We will test some internal controls. We'll talk about that in a minute. Look at any potential financial statement risks for the year. And then we develop our audit strategy based on that high level understanding, both our individual test planning and the overall approach for the year. In terms of interim testing, so we talked about this in years past, but we begin with a look at key processes, and we define key processes as those that impact your financial reporting, so the ultimate preparation and issuance of a CAFR at year end. So you can see those listed there. When we say we do a walkthrough, that just means that we're looking at the overall process. What are the key controls that have been designed for that process? Are they designed effectively? Are they designed appropriately to identify any material misstatements? And then are they implemented? So is the city actually doing them? This testing, though, is done at a point in time. Then for certain of those processes, we go further with a test of operating effectiveness, and that's taking a sample across the fiscal year to make sure it's actually operating throughout the fiscal year. We mainly focus on the disbursements testing there, but we'll bring reports back in December as to how the design, implementation, and then also the effectiveness is working. We also do some testing over census data. We include what goes to both TMRS and to your actuary that values your OPEB or your life insurance plan. This is a good garbage in, garbage out kind of test. So whatever the actuary is using for their valuation is dependent upon the information the city provides. So we look at that underlying data and make sure that it's complete and accurate. And then we'll look at year end at the actual assumptions within those valuations. We also test confirmations for water receivables as of August 31st. We look at the February debt issuance and then the funds that that issuance was allocated toward. And then we do inventory observations. You can see the 4 locations that we selected for this year. This involves going on site after the personnel of the city have counted at those locations. And then we do a follow-up count to make sure that we're in agreement on a sample of the inventory amounts there. Want you to know that we are working in consultation with the city for our actual procedures this year. Obviously, we're very sensitive to the impact of COVID, both for our employees and for the city's employees. So we are doing a lot of Zoom meetings. We've worked with your IT department for the city as well as city management to make sure we're able to properly do as much testing remotely and from our offices as possible. So far, the only exception to that has been the inventory observations, but we've maintained our distancing there to be on site for those counts. But we want you assured that there's been no change in the quality of the audit because of this. Thankfully, we're in a highly technological age right now, so it gives us the opportunity to do that remotely. At this time, the remaining fieldwork schedule looks, as you see on the screen. We will be back November 9th to do the compliance testing. As I mentioned, early November, we'll determine which programs we'll be testing that relate to that, but there will be a few major programs to look at for uniform guidance. November 30th, we will do the year-end financial audit test work, and we plan to bring you preliminary findings December 15th at your next budget meeting. And then we have estimated report timing. So if all goes as planned, January 5th, we'll have a CAFR draft for management to review, which will follow with a draft to this committee on January 12th. That gives you about a week and a half or so to read thoroughly and bring us any questions or comments that you may have on that draft for us to incorporate before we issue on January 22nd, which then also is in keeping with a February council meeting on the 16th. And then finally, wanted to let you know if there was any positive to COVID, it was that the governing boards have pushed out some of the effective dates for upcoming pronouncements. So we were supposed to be implementing fiduciary activities this year. That has been delayed a year, so we don't have to worry with that until fiscal 21. And then we'll follow that in 22 with the lease standard, all of which we work with Janice and her team to make sure we are properly implementing and addressing any questions that they have in that process. That was a quick version of a planning discussion. Are there any questions that you have?
Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, Katie,
No,
this is,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Katie, thank you so much for the presentation. I did see, can we go to that previous slide where we talk about the impact of COVID?
Yes.
Are there any changes in how we have to report because of COVID?
At this time, there are not. The reporting requirements are the same. There are some new guidelines that are coming depending on which types of funding that entities have received that may be slightly delayed just because they hadn't written all the standards around the requirements for receiving certain funding around CARES or other COVID-specific funding that could have been received. But by the time we get into the work for the city, I think we'll have most of that guidance. So I don't anticipate much of a delay there.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you again for the presentation.
No, and that was really mine. I mean, I knew GASB had delayed their implementation of those couple of rules. Just seeing if there was anything else that was, aside from, you know, everything being out of the ordinary, if there was anything in terms of procedurally or that y'all had to look at it you didn't have to in the past.
I think, again, it'll come down to what we have to determine as the major programs for compliance work, and we're waiting on the city to finalize all of their spending reports so we can do that assessment. But I anticipate that one of the programs will be something that does involve money received as a result of COVID, which will fall under that uniform guidance testing. But I won't know that for sure until we get final numbers from them around November.
Sounds good. Thanks, Katie.
Uh-huh.
Very good.
This is Holmes, and really my question is from maybe previous year carryover, where we were using different systems to produce the data. I know last year we got a little bit better about getting the information to the audit partner. And I guess maybe this is more internal to Janice. I can't see if she's there today. But were you anticipating any kind of dual system issues this time around as far as the accounting data that you're receiving from the city?
I'm not expecting any, but I think Janice is looking to chime
Okay,
in.
there she is. I see Janice now.
Thank
It
you.
seems like we maybe got through most of that last year, so maybe it's not an issue this year.
You are correct, Councilmember Holmes. We did work through that last year, and I think we'll be using a similar process this year. So we anticipate that going smoothly.
Great. Thanks, Janice.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Katie. We appreciate everything you do to keep us on track.
Well, and thank you all for everything that you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you, Janice, and your team as well. Bradley, you want to introduce the next item?
Sounds good. Our next item will involve a discussion of our CIP, our capital improvements program, and general debt capacity. We'll be joined at the table by Assistant Finance Director Isaiah Preza and Budget Manager Paul Diaz. And they'll be presenting information on the development of the CIP with an eye towards a February debt sale. And as you'll hear from the team, a key element of today's meeting is obtaining council's direction on the amount of debt to be issued so that our CIP team can develop a prioritized list of projects to be funded in the upcoming sale. As we target a February sale, our timeline for finalizing the CIP you're going to see is tight. So we look forward to today's discussion and your direction. At this point, I'll turn it over to Isaiah.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, the Office of Management and Budget will discuss the FY21 Capital Improvement Program development. We'll discuss how city goals tie to CIP, review the benefits of the new CIP schedule, go over different funding scenarios, review current proposed projects, and outline the next steps. To illustrate the funding options, our team has created a scenario model that will demonstrate the financial impact of a phase-in 80-20 distribution between the O&M and the INS property tax rates. The scenario model is driven by a set of assumptions that we will also review. As Bradley mentioned, our city manager, we are seeking direction on CIP funding options from City Council. Our discussion today will lay the groundwork for the FY21 CIP development. At this point, I will now hand over the presentation to our budget manager, Paul Diaz.
Thank you, Isaiah, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Now, as we approach the FY21 CIP development, we want to ensure that staff's recommendations are aligned with council goals. Now, to do this, we lean into the idea that we're building a culture of a high-performing government. We want to think strategically about our tax rate, about the truth in taxation calculation, and provide an accurate 5-year forecast on debt capacity. Now, many factors affect capacity, including new value in the TIFs, and the overall growth in the city. It's imperative that we understand these factors to understand the overall aggregate effects of our role. By taking this strategic approach, it allows us to improve infrastructure in the city in a timely, logical, and affordable manner. We know as infrastructure improves, so too does staff's ability to hit those targets that council has set in terms of facilitating economic development and enhancing the quality of life. By taking a holistic approach to CIP, we can develop a plan that provides equity across the city and makes Waco a safe and vibrant place. At our last budget and audit meeting, our Assistant City Manager, Paul Kane, discussed a plan to shift the development of CIP to later in the calendar. Staff believes this gives us some distinct advantages. In the old model, the CIP process occurs during the development of the operating budget in the spring and summer. The CIP process also occurs while folks are protesting their value. If you'll recall, this year, $1.8 billion of value was still under protest at the time of the certification on July 25th. With that much value under protest, it makes forecasting debt capacity in a 5-year view very difficult. In this new approach, this new method in which the CIP occurs in the winter, after the values are certified and following the adoption of the budget process, it allows staff and ultimately council to focus specifically on the CIP, kind of outside of the hecticness of the budget process and outside of the highest and busiest time when protests are occurring. So to understand where we're going on our assessed value, we need to understand where we're at. So here's a breakdown of our current assessed value. As you may have guessed, single family makes up the largest portion of our value, followed by commercial value, and then multifamily. These three segments alone total 76% of our value. It's important to know that our starting point for tax year 2021 is we brace for the impact COVID may have on our tax roll. But we are not doing this alone or in a vacuum. Yesterday, we met with our financial advisor to discuss interest rates and ways to forecast COVID's impact and our strategies as we go into bond rating agencies later, bond agency meetings later in the winter. Currently, staff is working with the CAD to develop reports which segments out income producing properties like offices and hotels and run different scenarios with the goal of understanding how changes in those segments can have an impact on the roll as a whole. It's similar to the approach that we take in sales tax. You know, if retail drops 2%, but manufacturing increases 5%, what's the net effect? We're taking that same analytical approach to property tax. So as we run these different scenarios, we're also running this through our debt capacity model. And here's an example of how the model works. It has three parts. The first part is in which we lay our current debt obligations, which is represented by the blue bars. As you can imagine, those obligations go down over the course of a 5-year period. Next, the model calculates what the debt service requirements would be for our CIP plan. The model allows us to customize things like interest rates and the length of the debt. This is represented by the orange bars. Lastly, we're able to make revenue projections based on different assumptions like base growth or growth in new development. This is represented by the gray line. And when the revenue line is less than our debt service requirements, represented by the green box, the model calculates what our INS portion of the tax rate would need to be to cover that amount of debt in the plan. Or conversely, how much we would need to reduce our CIP to be fiscally constrained. So as we begin to work through the FY21 CIP, here's a list of potential general capital projects. This list is the same that was presented in the budget with 2 additions as noted with the star. That would be the stormwater CIP and then the Mars Old Hewitt Road project. Now, please note, cash CIP in the FY21 budget totals $2.48 million. We have a couple slides here in a minute that kind of shows that breakdown of those projects. And currently, staff is working on a prioritized general capital project plan. That recommended plan is to be reviewed by management in the upcoming weeks and presented to this body as part of the November meeting. Also, as part of the November meeting, staff hopes to have solidified numbers on the total assessed value, including any refunds. Also, our financial advisor will be present at that meeting. I will pause here for a minute for you to review the potential project candidates that we've shown. Staff has asked that if you'd like any more information or to edit or to add any projects to this list, please let the manager's office know so that as we set up for that meeting, at the next meeting, that can be part of the discussion. Our CIP project managers are on the line to answer any specific questions you may have about this list or any of these projects. And I'll pause here for a moment, Mayor.
Have we received this presentation? Has it been emailed to us? Can we go ahead and get a copy of that so we can, have a chance to review it? Thank you.
It hasn't been emailed, but I will.
Okay.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, let's continue.
Yes, sir. The next slide shows the breakdown of the streets projects. Pull that one up. In the projects, we have approximately $4.4 million for the reclamation projects, and then approximately $13 million for the mill and overlay projects that we have here. Again, we would welcome any comments that you have after you receive this so that we can make sure that it's part of the discussion for the November meeting. The next slide we have here is the cash funded CIP in the FY21 budget that totals $2.4 million as shown here with a mix of slurry seal as well as thin overlay mix as the application types. Now, when we do projections on CIP, the assumptions are very important. For this approach, we've taken a pretty minimal approach in terms of base growth. In the first 2 years, the base growth is only at 2%, trying to hedge against the volatility that COVID could have on our roll. We've also shown modest increases in new improvements. In the first year, we've actually shown a decrease relative to the trend that we're seeing. Typically, the city of Waco sees about $200 million worth of new improvements. We've got forecasted in only 190 as we try to move forward with a conservative approach. The other thing that we've done is we've increased the number of exemptions that we're seeing. So this is a very conservative approach as a 5-year as we kind of brace for the impact of what COVID could have on the property tax roll. Now we're going to switch to the actual model that Isaias had mentioned previously. Now in Waco, in the current year CIP plan is actually sold in the spring. This first payment of debt occurs several months later in the fall, actually in the new fiscal year. This is a similar process to when you buy a home and your first mortgage payment is a few months after you actually close on the house. There's a bit of a delay. Because of the schedule in which your first payment is not until the next fiscal year, when a city approaches its current year CIP, it really should keep an eye towards how it will affect their tax rate in the following year. To illustrate this point, we developed this model, which runs 2 different scenarios related to shifting more of next year's tax rate to the INS portion of over time and to do more capital projects in the current year. Both scenarios use both scenarios use the same growth assumptions we discussed in the previous slides. In this first scenario, the ratio of INS to O&M does not shift in the 5 years. Currently, that ratio is 83 to 17%. And with those assumptions, in FY21, the city could sell $21.7 million of projects. Due to the conservative AV assumptions, general capital projects is limited to less than $10 million in most of the out years. The one exception is in FY23, when there's a slightly higher base because of projected rebound, hopefully following the COVID pandemic. In a 5-year span, operating revenue in the general fund in this status quo plan totals $353 million. Now in scenario 2, staff kept the same AV assumptions, but started shifting half a penny every year from the O&M to the INS in an attempt to have a ratio of in 5 years of an 80-20 split. I want to give you a couple of rule of thumb numbers to keep in the back of your head as we go through this discussion. First, in Waco, 1 cent on the tax rate is equal to about $1 million. Second, in a normal year, in a non-COVID year, debt service, both the principal and interest on a 20-year term for $1 million is about $70,000 principal and interest. However, in the COVID period, when we're experiencing interest rates of about 2% or less, the annual debt service is about $61,000 on a 20-year term. So by taking the half penny, which is equal to about $500,000, and dividing that by the annual debt service of $1 million, you can calculate what your debt capacity would be by shifting half a penny. For $500,000 divided by 61,000, you end up with about $8.2 million worth of extra capacity every time you shift a penny. If council wanted to move forward with the strategy of shifting pennies, the FY21 sale could be increased. You can see there, we go from a debt capacity of about 21.7 to just over $30 million. If council wanted to move forward with this strategy, and assuming that our total taxable value is in line with our projections, the general fund would receive about $500,000 less than if the council stayed with the current strategy. However, in a 5-year span, in this 2080 phase-in approach, it is estimated the cost of the general fund would be about $5.6 million, but your debt capacity on the INS side would increase by $40.7 million. While council could choose to shift more pennies sooner, say a full 2 cents in the next year, that would dramatically increase your debt capacity in the current year. However, this phased approach is better in line with staff's ability to start and complete projects. That type of work would definitely increase your debt capacity, but it would also exceed your work capacity of getting projects done. Staff feels that this phased approach is a better balance between work capacity and debt capacity. So in summary, Mayor, staff is seeking the following direction. Would council support an approach in which 1/2 penny of the O&M rate be moved to the INS portion over the course of the next few years? It is anticipated that the shifting pennies approach would provide approximately $40 million worth of new CIP capacity. It is also anticipated that this approach would cost the general fund about $5.6 million in the same time period. There are additional slides in the presentation, Mayor, but I would like to pause here to answer any questions that council may have.
Yeah, I've got a few. So this penny shifting, and this is where when we talk penny and then percentages, as opposed to percentages, this can get a little more confusing. So in moving 1/2 cent or $500,000 over to the debt capacity each year, what impact, based on the growth rates you are predicting on the asset value growth, what does that do to the general fund operating revenues? I mean, are we taking, like this year we had to move a penny over, and our revenue collections are actually less than they were in the prior year. Is that anticipated with this plan as well, or do we still anticipate general fund O&M revenues growing even though we're doing this?
So we've got that laid out in terms of the operating revenue. It's on a line or row 23 there. In terms of, we would still see growth in the total AV, which is going to have an effect of increasing the amount of revenue that we're having in. In terms of line 31, you can see what the variance would be if you left everything as status quo. So for instance, in the FY21 budget, you've got $66.8 million worth of operating revenue. And then in the out years, you've got 67.2, 68.5. And so because we have a growth in the AV, we still would have a growth in the revenue on the property tax on the O&M side, just not to the same level if we kept everything as status quo.
Okay, now I see that line.
Council member, may I hop in there just to make an observation? $1 million to operating revenue in the general fund will certainly create a lot of pressure to deal with things like the basics: employee compensation, health insurance, TMRS, and other basic concerns. So I do think the question is a valid one to ask, because every shift we make has a corresponding net impact on our abilities to operate. And so I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the sensitivities to how we're trying to balance these two things.
Sure. No, and that was really my question, is I just want to make sure that if we're planning on this, and I understand, each year we'll have some flexibility to actually go through that, but yeah, just making sure we're not undercutting the O&M rate too much to make sure that we're able to do what we need to. And again, since this is my first time seeing all this, my only other question at first blush is, so just make sure I'm reading it right, is that even with the $0.5 penny shift, our annual, if we're looking at over the next 5 years, our annual debt capacity for new debt, which would cover streets and other general fund supported infrastructure, would at most be 21 million and would otherwise cap out 16 to 18. I'm just, and I asked that specifically as it relates to what had been our proposed streets program, and understanding that this year we had to curtail that some, but just wanting to know how that might, if we'd be able to get that back to a place where we know it needs to be based on this scenario.
That is correct. Under this scenario, you have in the out years, 21.6 would be the highest. One thing I would say, council member, is that this is a very conservative AV number, and one of the biggest factors on this is if AV is stronger than the 2 to 3% growth rates that we're showing in most years, that could dramatically increase the capacity both in the debt service side as well as the general fund side. Wanted to kind of show a really conservative number in the 5-year.
Okay.
So what assumptions we're using on the AV again?
Sure.
The percent change, yeah, right where you have it highlighted.
So that would be the aggregate effect of it. There are a couple components that come in there. That would be your base growth, which is pretty conservative, starting at 2%. In the fifth year, only seeing 3%. There is new AV, which is starting at about 190 million and increasing just a couple percents every year. And then the third factor is kind of a contra effect in which we increase the number of exemptions that we see. So when you put all of those together, those cells that ICAS has highlighted would be the assumptions that we have in. The big one standing out is there in 24, in which we have kind of a bounce back from hopefully with the end of COVID and some return to normalcy in the property values.
We're also.
And then you've got to go back down to that 3%. And then and again, this is kind of hitting this cold. It's a lot of data, good information here. But yeah, I'm like John, I want to digest this a little bit. But that's new construction as well. It's not just, the tax base going up on existing. That incorporates new building or the optimism of new construction and growth, et cetera.
It does, council member, and I think we're all anticipating, on the hopeful side, as the guy said, it's a conservative approach here. We're hopeful there will be a couple of economic development projects that bring value in the 2022 and 2023 years that could move the needle significantly in a positive direction.
Then my other comments, I think John kind of picked them up. Just is that leaving us enough wiggle room on the operating side, the O&M side, that the question was already answered. You still see a little bit of room there in growth. How does this, assuming that most of this leverage goes to our pavement program or infrastructure, how does this, going back to that pavement condition index, does this still keep us going in the right direction? Because I guess as we looked at this at a macro level earlier this year, at one point our numbers were, pre-COVID were like 25, 30 million, a year for leverage or pavement program commitment. This is scaling it back, and I agree, because I think we can maybe stretch that the capital outlay out a little bit on our pavement program. But I still want to make sure if at all possible, as we move this ratio to 80-20, I want to make sure we're at least moving in the direction of getting that pavement condition index back up to 65 or 70 or wherever we were, from the sub 50 where we were a couple of years ago when we started this. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, Councilmember Holmes, this is Paul Kane. I think as we develop the plan, certainly the first thing we need to get is some sense of how much of a program we're going to be able to develop. And then once we have those numbers, then staff will put together a priority list of projects and be able to report back what the PCI effect of those projects would be. It's a little difficult not knowing exactly what kind of financial plan we have going forward. We need to get that set, and then our engineering staff will be able to develop a plan and be able to report back what the impact on the PCI will be. Of course, the streets chosen in that plan will have a large impact on what the PCI does. I think the effort here this afternoon is to show you that we're being fairly conservative in a very uncertain world with regard to TAV. In the past, the plan was to shift pennies and sometimes multiple pennies over the next few years. And of course, that was predicated on the values exceeding the state cap. And in previous years, we were at 7% or more growth in TAV. Operating revenues were 7 to 11% in some cases, increasing each year. Obviously, this last year was a reset for us, and so we're trying to scale things back, honestly, so that we don't get ourselves in a bind. As someone mentioned earlier, I think Councilmember Kennard mentioned we moved almost 2 cents this last year over just to cover debt that we'd already issued because the value came down so much compared to where we had projected it to be before. So we're trying to be conservative this year. As Isaiah and Paul pointed out, we are planning to issue $30 million in February, which would take care of a very important couple of projects down in our industrial corridor in the Mars and Old Hewitt roads. And so 30 million is really on par with what we have been doing for the last few years. But it's tied up in two pretty large projects. About a third of it goes to two projects. So we are trying to be as creative as we can going forward, but also trying to be prudent so that we don't over issue and then have to shift multiple pennies out into the future. So that's the goal of today, is to try to show you what we're looking at a half cent. And we'll revisit this each year, as Councilmember Kennard mentioned. Each year as we get new TAVs in, we'll go through this process every year on what the next sales should be. So as we're looking out into years 3, 4, and 5 on this chart, recognize that that's going to change substantially, hopefully, as values pick up and growth picks up. So we'll revisit this every year with the City Council going forward.
Oh, and I do want to say I and my district is very thankful and appreciative that we are finding the money for the Hewitt and Old Hewitt and Mars Drive projects, because those are very much needed. And so thank you for that. And I do, yeah, you know, I mean, it is all just kind of conjecture. We're doing the best we can. And it's helpful to remember too, that pre-COVID, with that asset net, you know, taxable value growth that we had, you know, 4 and 3 years ago, that was, you know, a majority of that was new growth compared to valuation increases. 2 years leading up to COVID, it was almost entirely valuation increases with very little new growth. So, I mean, for us to have any, I think that just kind of redoubles the fact that if we want to be able to continue to fund our infrastructure the way we need to, and if there is to be substantial value growth going forward, I think it's going to need, our economic development operations and efforts will need to be redoubled. And you know, I think there's some interesting things on the horizon which may help in that regard. But I think that's where the valuation creation is where we'll have to bank on going forward, is hopefully from new development as opposed to relying on valuation increases. So, but I think you're doing, I mean, again, I appreciate the conservatism in this. I know it's a tricky thing to do. And I think you've got a good plan. The only other thing I'd ask is on the, you know, the 80-20 target. I mean, you know, 80-20 seems to be a good heuristic for a lot of things mathematically and just kind of societally here. I mean, is there any, is that what we want to have as a goal for policy, or is there anything that the rating agencies or anybody kind of lean on with that, or is that just something that heuristically just kind of makes sense based on kind of where we are?
I would respond that I think you're correct in the latter. It's not helpful to look at what other cities do, because each city is different. They have their own needs, they have their own values. It makes it really hard to say this is a standard across cities, because each city is different. I think 80-20 is, as you said, is kind of a good goal to set. It seems to make sense in terms of value going forward. And there's no real science to it. It is somewhat arbitrary, to be honest with you. But it's a ratio that shows a continued effort towards capital improvement program in the city.
Well, and I think it's important that we're actually looking at that, because it's something we haven't really kind of even acknowledged or kept track of before now. And
right.
It can tell you if you are starting to get a little over levered, or if it is kind of tipping too far one way or another. So if nothing else, just having, it can be a light policy, but just having a goal of that to make sure we're keeping track of the debt kind of the debt leverage we are taking on versus how that relates to our operating side. I think that makes sense.
Yes, sir. The other thing I'll point out, and we've had some discussions about this in the context of the stormwater utility, but that should we go forward with that in the future, that's going to provide additional opportunities for us going forward. So when we're talking about this penny shifting, that gives us a capability to perhaps not have an operating impact by shifting some of those costs to the stormwater utility. Then the revenue impact to the general fund from shifting of pennies is not there. And so that's an option going forward, certainly. And that's, depending on how things go over the next month or so, that will greatly affect how we put the budget together next year and our calculations going forward there. So I just wanted to mention that as another option that, as we talk about all these variables, that's another variable in play going forward that will greatly affect how things are done in the future.
Hey, Paul, this is Hector. I have a quick question for you, and maybe this was mentioned in the presentation earlier, but why is the general debt capacity in 2023 so much higher than the other years?
Actually, it's due to some, I would say, creative financing with that we're able to do because of our partnership with the Waco McLennan County EDC. They have contributed $3.4 million towards the construction of Mars and Old Hewitt. And our current plan, and we're working with the FAA on this, financial advisor on this to make sure it's a good plan. But our plan now is to bank that $3.4 million and then draw it down equal to the annual debt service for Mars and Old Hewitt. So let's say that's $600,000 a year for those two streets. We'll draw down $600,000 a year from that 3.4. And by 26, 27, that buys us some time. In 26 and 27, our current debt service on the general side falls off substantially, like 4 or 5 cents. So it gives us an opportunity to do those projects now. They're much needed. It reflects our partnership with WebMec and allows us to do those projects without any rate impact today. And we'll be able to absorb that 6 years from now.
Okay, thank you. And maybe you said that in the presentation earlier, and I thought I missed it, but thank you for explaining that to me. I appreciate it.
Great question. Yes, sir.
Hey, Paul, this is Darius. And you started to touch on this, but I wanted to ask, just for clarification's sake, we are not including any fees that are being discussed as possibilities right now, specifically in regards to the stormwater utility fee in any of these projections, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that's just out of being conservative on that?
Yes, sir. Until the council votes, that's the projection that we're not willing to make at this point.
No, that's great. I just wanted to be sure, because looking at it, you know, there's always at least in my mind, it sort of triggers I hate to say a wash out of the, you know, money that we take in, and we just, instead of using that money from the general fund for these projects, we use the utility money that we took in. So all in all, it really, you know, boils down to be the same. We just use that general fund money elsewhere. So I just didn't, because of that, I wanted to make sure that was not included in this, and we weren't just considering it, you know, a wash with money that we have available to spend on this. So
Yes,
that's
sir.
great.
You're correct. Not included here.
Great.
So what I suppose the direction we're looking for today is, would council be comfortable with us planning for a partial move towards this 80-20 ratio that would be around half a cent for the following fiscal year, so that we can kind of know going in where we're at. We'll still do Mars, Old Hewitt. We'll have about, was that 18 million, Isaiah, I think, for our general program. So we'll issue a total of 30 million in February, and we'll have staff go back and develop a plan around the 18 million and come back to you next month with that plan going forward, and recognizing that in the future, hopefully values come back and we have greater capacity in the future. We're just very nervous, I think is the right word at this point, to issue a whole lot of debt in the spring, not knowing what the values are going to do in the following year.
Yeah, this is Holmes. I agree with the element of conservatism and ratcheting that back just a little bit. That makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I'll support
I
the
wouldn't
decision
use
as
the
well.
word.
Go ahead, Audrey.
I wouldn't use the word nervous. I use the word cautious, and I mean we are responsible for this, and that's good stewardship. So I support that.
Great point. Thank you.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, it makes sense to me too. No, I'm not going to get a vote. So that's I think it's a good. I'll say I said the direction. I think it's a good direction.
All right.
Any other questions or comments on this item? All right, thank you all for a great presentation, and that model is really helpful in helping us understand how this will work going forward.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. Thanks, gentlemen. Next up, we have a discussion of the use of small business funding resources. Deidre Emerson, our Deputy City Manager, will be making this presentation, which is primarily a follow-up to council questions that we've had regarding the usage of small business resources that have been recently added to the general fund budget and also included in the CDBG spending plans. Particularly, council members have been interested in how the various resources would be used to work with existing small business partners, chambers of commerce, and others within the small business ecosystem. Deidre will also be updating the council members on a couple of recent requests from potential small business partners and outlining our approach to ensure all these resources are used in the most impactful way possible. Deidre?
All right, thank you, Bradley. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Today, as Bradley mentioned, I'll be discussing the City of Waco small business funding resources and proposed ways to support our small business ecosystem within the Waco McLennan County community. The presentation will recap what we have learned since the implementation of the Small Business Recovery Program and propose a plan to move forward in addressing the need of additional resources for small businesses within Waco. So I'll give you a little bit of background, talk about the two main funding sources that have been identified, the uses of those funds, potential program benefits, potential partnerships, and our timeline for moving forward. Again, on the background, the Small Business Recovery Fund, and if you all may recall, that fund was created with a combination of money from Waco McLennan County Economic Development Corporation as well as the City of Waco. There's $830,000 put into that fund to provide relief as well as for small businesses to help them prepare for, prevent, and ensure they remain competitive in the marketplace in the midst of our pandemic. The funding provided an economic development incentive of up to $5,000 to small businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. The program encouraged the increase and retention of quality jobs, as well as maintenance and creation of funding streams. The Small Business Recovery Fund the Small Business Recovery Fund impacted 210 businesses within Waco McLennan County and retained over 541 jobs. Of those businesses impacted, 157 were minority women-owned businesses, 85 were low moderate income, and 43 businesses located outside of the City of Waco city limits. To date, we have dispersed $602,188. And just as you know, we have a small balance left in the WebMec funds, as well as there's about $200,000 left in the CDBG funds that we continue to work and identify businesses that are available and eligible for those dollars. So during the implementation of the Small Business Recovery Fund, a number of challenges, and you all have seen this before, but a number of challenges were identified and solutions were provided. But we will continue to be responsive to those and we work to implement those solutions, we knew that these challenges outside of the Small Business Recovery Fund process could have longer term impacts to businesses. So as we began our FY21 budget process, we looked at what funding sources that we had available in order to continue to support small businesses going forward, and identify potential solutions and opportunities for those businesses to excel. So the two main funding sources would be our general fund dollars as well as our community development block grant funds. While the general fund dollars provide much greater flexibility to support businesses within the City of Waco, and the community development block grant funds are restricted to low to moderate income businesses within the City of Waco. So after evaluating the challenges, we discovered small businesses needed additional resources outside of the financial assistance. And so staff recommended during the budget process the creation of a small business education fund, a small business education program. And the goal of this program is to provide businesses with the tools necessary to sustain long-term viability and resources to assist from an operations standpoint. The businesses will participate in courses designed to fit the needs of small businesses and be incentivized to participate. The coursework could include a number of things, including just the basics of a business, developing a viable business plan, how to use social media to grow your business. And one of the things that we have seen, and I'll call it a collective, but we've seen different communities develop pipelines through social media. So they're essentially creating their own social media groups where different businesses are able to be promoted who don't have their own web page or online access, but they are utilizing social media to help promote and grow their businesses. A number of the businesses have not been, those that are eligible have not become certified as MWBs, and a number of them don't know how to do business with the city of Waco. And so we want to make sure that we are providing an opportunity in support of one of our strategic goals, as well as to make sure that we are enhancing and supporting equity within our community with these things within this education program. As mentioned previously during the budget process, in order to facilitate the education program, our plan would be to partner with a local small business education provider. And so it's not something that the city of Waco would do themselves, but we want to make sure that we provide opportunity for our nonprofits to grow themselves as well. And so through a request for proposal process, we would issue that proposal, and it would allow the opportunity for potentially one or more providers to provide this type of programming for small businesses. Additionally, staff is proposing to establish an ongoing small business loan fund that will provide loans for businesses up to $10,000 and for a period of up to 3 years, with an interest rate of 3% for working capital and or business expansion. During the Small Business Recovery Program, staff had a number of businesses who requested additional assistance for items associated with expansion and retention of their business. This fund would be a benefit to the community and serve as seed funding for a revolving loan fund. So staff recommend the program be administered, our recommendation is that the program be administered by a partner agency that has the ability to work in conjunction with the local chambers as well as individual businesses. The benefits of implementing both the small business education and loan program will provide a variety of tools that will support and enhance the small business ecosystem and create revenue streams through some of the following: increasing their social capital to access and create long-term relationships with consumers and other businesses within the community that will lead to increased resources and revenue; access to capital through city loan programs and other financial institutions; utilize social media to market their business online and provide an understanding of what quality customer service and retention of customers determines the success of their business. For the implementation of the Small Business Loan Program, we have the ability to address this a couple of different ways. One, we have the ability to issue an RFP, and if through that process, if we implement the RFP, those individuals or proposers would be evaluated on their ability to manage the city programs and funding through the partners in their capacity for qualification, their performance and ability to effectively implement and execute programs in accordance with the program requirements. However, in advance of issuing an RFP, 2 organizations have come forth and expressed interest in partnering with the city and have requested a total of $110,000. And if you recall, during the budget process, there were funds in the general fund side allocated of $300,000 to support small business efforts. And so those two partners, sorry, I'm going to.
Hey, Deidre, real quick question. Was that budgeted for small business 300 or 250? I'm sorry.
I believe it was 300.
Okay, I was just making sure. So either way, if both of these go through, I mean, we still have the budget to fund them
Yes, those,
out of
yes,
our small business fund that was created this year.
that is correct.
Okay, thank you, my friend.
Sure. And so the two potential partners who have expressed interest so far, one is the McLennan Community Investment Fund. They've requested $50,000 to establish a community development financial institution, or CDFI. And then there's Kiva, has requested $60,000 to establish a local crowdfunding loan. They are a crowdfunding loan organization, sorry. I'll give you a little bit more information on each one of these. And so the McLennan Community Investment Fund is a 501c3 corporation that was established in 2020. Their goal is to promote economic growth and community development. They have a goal of becoming a certified CDFI within 2020 or early 2021. And they have the ability to serve McLennan County, including the city of Waco. The services that they would provide is a microenterprise finance program for profit or nonprofits with 5 or fewer employees, for requesting less than $50,000 for expansion, working capital, equipment, purchase or rental, or commercial real estate development or improvement. Their small business finance program would allow for financing to for-profit and nonprofit enterprises in an amount greater than $50,000 for the purpose of expansion, working capital, equipment purchase, rental, or commercial real estate development or improvement. And then there's the intermarried lending for nonprofits and CDFIs. There's financial products to nonprofits, organizations, CDFIs, and or emerging CDFIs. I think our focus here for what we envision for the Waco community would be the microenterprise and the small business finance.
And Deidre, those are typos on the numbers, right? It's less than 50,000 on the first and greater than 50,000 on the second one.
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Sorry. He's speaking on the second bullet, and it should say less than 50,000 and then greater than 50,000 for the small business finance.
Thank you. Just wanted to be sure we clarified that.
Sure. And so their funding request, they have a $50,000 funding request, of which $10,000 would be used for operating funds and $40,000 to establish a permanent loan fund. The request would be used to defray the costs not payable from the CDFI fund grant that they will receive, and then make the balance to be used to make loans to qualified small business owners and nonprofits. And then this particular one, we do understand that the county has already funded this program for $50,000. And then the other proposal that we've received, and I understand that John Passavant is online if he needs to chime in for some of this next step, but the other proposal.
Hey, Deidre, before we leave the first one, the county did approve that $50,000 grant to them last week, I believe, or week before. And in addition to that, they applied for a federal technical assistance grant of $125,000 back in April, and that was granted in September as well. So they are on track. They think they're on track to start loaning money right after the first of the year.
Okay, great.
For all intents and purposes, just for informational, I serve on that board, and we are on track.
And these loans are percent interest? What interest rate?
It said 3%, I believe, for 3 years.
Thank you.
I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment to let John in, or do I want to do the presentation?
Let's get to the end and then we'll.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the other proposal that we have received is from Kiva, and this is I said it's from Kiva, but it is a outgrowth of a startup Waco. It is, and they will be implementing the Kiva program. And so Kiva is was developed as a collaboration between the Kauffman Foundation and the National League of Cities. They tend to serve as the first rung within a financial ladder, as demonstrated on the slide. They provide gap funding or initial seed funding for entities. The businesses that participate, and I can show you more about this on the next couple of slides, but there's a responsibility or a commitment made by the businesses that participate in the KIVA process. Traditionally, 60% of KIVA has funded 60% of entities that were previously denied or rejected for funding from other borrowing systems, as well as their borrowers typically have a credit score that is below 650. 58% of those have been below, their credit scores have been below 650. And I think the interesting thing about this slide is that it shows kind of the progression on how businesses and the perceived risk of credit on businesses, and that KIVA fills that gap, the first $5,000 to $10,000. CDFIs typically come in at the next level, and then there's online lending as well as SBAs and then banks, and businesses can progress in this process. So while every community is unique, there's an opportunity for it to be set up its own way. And so in our particular instance, where you see the trustee, the hub, the funder, Startup Waco, as I understand, would serve as the hub. And the city of Waco would receive the funds. We would provide dollars via the hub, which would be Startup Waco. They would have a credit asset manager who could help facilitate the process in connecting the different businesses to the funding sources. And again, this project has an origin of being a collaboration between the Kauffman Foundation as well as the National League of Cities. There are a number of new participating cities. Waco, should we move forward with this, would be included in this list. And so the term for this project is, this is a program that would run from mid-November of this year through mid-summer 2021. A minimum of the goals for the program would be to do 10 loans funded on the platform, with the majority being MWBEs. And the requirements would be, the funding that we would provide would be to assist in the $10,000 would be utilized to assist with the establishing the hub fee, the KIVA hub. $15,000 would come from the Kauffman Foundation. The balance of what KIVA is requesting would be utilized for the asset manager position as well as loan matching funds. And I do think it's important to show that that the business owners are required to raise a quarter or 25% of their needed loan amount, with the other 25% match from a private source. An additional 50% match will come from the city funds. So for your review and consideration today, we brought these two proposals before you, in addition to how to utilize the CDBG funds in conjunction with these two different programs. We started accepting, applications for under our Small Business Recovery Fund, and I just want to let this slide show as a progression. So we started that process on the Small Business Recovery Fund. We're moving into this next process of how we've allocated our general fund dollars for the fiscal year 21, as well as CDBG funds for fiscal year 21. The next step would be for us to draft an RFP for the implementation of the small business education program, should council decide that they want to consider one of the two proposals that were presented before them today, and then we would progress on to award and implementation. So that concludes my full presentation, and I do know that John Pasavan is online to help respond to any questions specific to KIVA.
Well, let's open it for discussion.
Yeah, can I start off first? As it comes to the CDFI, Andre, I'll give you credit in your advisory and Shepherd in this. most communities have operating, functioning, and robust CDFIs to help promote this type of financial services and empowerment and inclusiveness for low to moderate income small businesses. And the fact that we really have not to this point. And so this work, I think, is incredibly important to have a functioning and a robust and a true community partner CDFI in our community. I mean, I know that Project Waco has looked at some large grants from big financial institutions before that were systemic in nature, that were, seven figures. I mean, and one of the top qualifying things to even before you can even start thinking of applying, is you have to partner with your local CDFI. And so the supporting the building up of this organization, I think, is key for a lot of the work that we want to do in terms of equity, inclusiveness, and particularly small business support. So I appreciate, Andre, the work y'all are already doing, and appreciate everyone that's been involved in getting this stood up to this point. And I think it's great. I mean, the Treasury has shown that they have some support in moving this forward, and hopefully get certification for this organization as a truly certified CDFI soon. And I think it's a great thing and something sorely and desperately needed within our community. And as far as Kiva, so just a little bit more background. We were invited to participate in an annual conference by the Kauffman Foundation, and that they, in conjunction with the National League of Cities, had provided 11 different, Kauffman Foundation's whole kind of bailiwick and focus is small business and entrepreneurship support. And they had provided support in conjunction with NLC to have 11 different project scopes that you could choose from that promoted small business development in one form or fashion or another. One of them was to partner with Kiva, which is a well-established micro-lending online platform that provides crowdsourced funding for folks kind of just getting started. And like Deidre said, and as that slide showed, we in the community, when you look at the slide that showed the kind of amount lent and the financial ladder and capital access, prior to the pandemic, we really had banks. We had one, maybe two SBA certified lenders, but they didn't really, I think we only had $3 million a year, maybe in total SBI certified loans. There was not a lot of activity there. For small business support, we had banks. Now, thanks to the PPP process, most of our local banks are certified SBA lenders. We are working towards a CDFI. And I think this Kiva platform is very complementary to a lot of the work that has already been proposed, specifically in that it really does address the very first initial phase of business startup capital and funding, while also providing just a differentiated and the crowdsource side component of it, provide some skin in the game. And just as well, the loan terms. It's important to note for Kiva, what happens is the 25, 50%, the matching, I mean, that's not required as part of the program that NLC and Kauffman supported. We can bring it in, and we provide that capital access manager, which Startup Waco is providing, which was one of the things identified on kind of the SBRF education program that Deidre originally talked about, which is helping provide business support to help them get them to a place to where they can go raise the capital. And the administrative fee and the work that this envisions, which Kauffman will help pay for, is to provide that capital access manager, which is that technical assistance component, to help these really small starting out businesses go and get their ducks in a row to be able to even access the platform in the first place. And then once they get on the Kiva platform, it's on the web. Anyone can donate to them. Anyone can provide assistance. The loans, again, 3 years, no interest, no credit checks. And so our proposal is that the way we would like to help support this program, for which the average loan amount's, I think, $6,000. And we would be, this goes a little beyond. So anyone can just put a business out there once they get a few small donations and can get access to the Kiva platform. This proposal would create an access manager that helps shepherd those businesses through that process and helps them access that money. And so the proposal would be, again, for the fee, which provides the technical assistance and support from Kiva, the access manager, which helps support the small businesses and getting on the platform and raising the funds at this very bottom rung. And then the 50,000 ask would be for a loan match fund, which we just proposed that, you know, if they can raise a quarter of it, I think we could get some CRA dollars or something from a local bank or a local company to provide another quarter to match that. And then we could come in with matching to provide the other half for, say, the first 10 that are in a part of this, in this cohort that is part of this project that we are looking to do in conjunction with Kaufman and NLC. But there's no requirement that has to be, that those matching have to do to those percentages. That's just something that we were proposing as we think would be reasonable and supportive of this type of initiative. And, you know, I mean, again, their stats are, you know, Kiva's platform has, you know, I think about 70% of those that access it are women-owned businesses. I think 65% of are people, persons of color. And you know, an average amount of $6,000 for a loan. So I don't even imagine we'll use the full 50. And it's an exciting way to provide a true entry-level capital access for businesses. You know, CDFI is great for those businesses that are, or for those individuals, businesses that are just on the cusp of being able to be banked and can help them and can get them to where they want to go. The Kiva platform is for those that aren't even quite there. I mean, this is, you know, at the very entry level, starting up, and they got to go hustle and got to go raise some of their own money. And if so, then I think we could, you know, provide a little bit of support for that and those wraparound services, technical assistance to help make sure that they succeed. So sorry, I rambled a bit, but the Kiva with Kaufman and NLC, y'all know I'm involved with NLC and I've been involved in this project. I've been looking at this since July. And I think it's something that would be supportive. And I also think that that this and or the CDFI for the education component and the actual loan fund, however it looks like. I mean, I will in my comments is just saying for the use of those two programs for the SBRF fund, I think one or both of these programs would make a lot of sense to house those. I mean, if they want to go out for an RFP, fine, but I want to be careful that we don't do too many things because we don't want to duplicate efforts too much. And I think the CDBG funds would be perfectly deployed either through the CDFI or partly through this, as long as the reporting requirements, we feel comfortable kind of truing all those up. And the education component that we're looking at, becoming a business, social media, Kiva's online. I mean, I think that both, the whole point of the Kiva Hub is to have that technical assistance and education component as part of it to help support those businesses. I know, and I'm understanding, and Andre may correct me on this, I may just talking out of the side of my mouth, but the CDFI also will help provide some technical assistance as well to make sure that our businesses are supported. And so I think these are great efforts. And I think we're understanding the way we want to go. And I think either or both of these would be a great avenue to deploy these resources and give what the work that our chambers are doing and to give the small businesses in our community capital access that has not been available to them to this point. And I'll shut up now. Sorry, I talked a lot.
That's good input, John. Thank you for that. Deidre, are we in a position, it appears to me based on Hector's question and your answer that we could be in a position to support both of these projects. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
I did want to ask one question, and I wanted to make sure that I'm not missing something somewhere. As far as the education component and the issuance of the issuance of the RFP, are you saying that would be for whoever is to provide the educational programming, or is the issuance of the RFP in addition to these two proposals that we've received as funders or potential lending partners?
So if you recall, during the budget process, we talked about specifically on CDBG for the small business education program, because there are a number or some individual nonprofit groups out there that have interest in providing those services. We thought it best to issue an RFP or recommend that we issue an RFP for the provision of the small business education program. It is our desire to ensure that individuals that are that go through that small business education program are fed into the CDFI process and/or Kiva, should you all decide to provide funding to both.
That's what I believed. I was just let me make sure that we're crystal clear. I understand crowdfunding, just by all the other entities that use, crowdfunding and sourcing. Tell me about the percentage. You said that they weren't actually required to raise a match percentage. To go back, talk to some more about that. So I have
Sure.
some clarity.
Well, just like any crowd-funded platform, to access the platform, they just need to. They try to make it. Kiva as an organization tries to make it very easy and attainable to get onto it, to at least get their pitch out there. So if you just got to get 5 individuals or supporters to give at least $25, and that gets your foot in the door. And then through what is proposed here with the hub platform, that those, once they have that idea and they get to that point, then the capital asset manager would provide some business support to get them onto the actual system. But once they're on the system, there are plenty of communities and foundations and others that provide matching funds and support, foundations and whatnot. But it is not required. If these funds, honestly, if the 50, which I don't think, particularly for this first round of the project, for say 10 loans, which is what is kind of the goal, if the matching funds weren't there, then I still believe wholeheartedly in providing a resource like this to help get them on the system, help get them out, and provide the technical assistance to help them grow their business and get them started, which would happen either way. And then they could go hustle all the money. But it seemed reasonable, and other communities in this cohort that are doing this through the NLC Kaufman kind of joint collaborative are providing some pool of funds that would be a matching pool to help support the uptake of this initiative and to help support our local small businesses get off the ground. But that's not required. It's just it's something that we could do, and that other foundations and other communities do as well.
And those are the new cities that were listed on the page for Kiva. They have active CDFIs as well.
I'm not sure about that. They're ones that have taken part in the Kaufman NLC joint initiative and attended the conference and did all of that. But I think a lot of them do, but I can't say that for sure.
I have a question, and I don't know if it would be for either the Johns or city staff, but is there some information that can be shared about how these organizations work with Spanish-speaking businesses and business owners?
I think from a city perspective, we could work with John Pasavan and John Kennard to get that information.
And Deidre, I don't know if this is even possible, and Jennifer, you can jump in here, but even as part of the RFP, we can put that included in the RFP.
That certainly is something that legally you could do, to have the ability to serve Spanish speakers.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Holmes. The cities at a juncture right now where just the support of small businesses is, so important to the Waco economy, and as we grow and really even more important, because I think over the last couple of years, we've seen small businesses get a little bit of traction, and the COVID thing kind of knocked them in their tracks a little bit, and they're trying to get back here. And I think this is a good time to be looking at this kind of assistance on behalf of all the taxpayers in the city, because I think there's almost a measurable ROI in this kind of investment, because through no fault of their own, some of these businesses have taken a step back, and let's help them get back to where they were and get that trajectory back to where they're helping the Waco economy. And as we go through, I kind of started with the Small Business Recovery Fund, which I think was a great program, and how it helped, how it targeted the MWBs, as we said. I think something like 75% was going to MWBs, and really getting to the folks who needed it. I think that's great. Now, as we kind of step into these other programs, the education program, the loan fund, and again, the CDFI, which I'm a big fan of that program. And the Kiva one is very interesting too. I think we can make all this stuff work. But in addition to that, I think we all also have seen like this financial navigator program. We got seem to have a lot of resources and capital kind of mobilizing at the same time. And
We're losing?
Mm-hmm.
They're all frozen.
They're all frozen.
Oh, no.
Well, what do you do?
Does that ever happen?
I've never seen that happen.
Let me see. Let me see if we've lost him.
They're still on the meeting, but this screen's frozen.
Okay.
because there's a bunch of bankers on the council here. It's good to get to see the growth. And again, I think it's almost amazing.
Councilmember Holmes, we lost like the last 20 seconds of what you were saying. I think the council members heard you, but y'all were frozen on our end.
And the public didn't hear.
you.
It was all really good stuff.
I'm inspired, actually.
As always, it is, I'm certain, good stuff, but if there's anything you want to recover.
No, just in general, seeing all these kind of programs and processes come together for which I think will be a measurable return on investment, ultimately, as the city grows and as the economy grows. Just making sure that something that some John and I and Hector rifle shotting some of these programs into again, this is small business, micro business growth. I think as we have 4 or 5, everybody's on the same page. We got good traction here. I'm excited to see this thing going and growing.
Well, and so I'll just in that by, or kind of go on that by saying, I mean, in terms of wanting to get it done and see it deployed and getting the support done as quick as possible. I mean, I guess the RFP is for the CDBG funds that we have extra that are allocated. My personal preference would be, I mean, given that the county's already supported the CDFI, and seeing that we have $250,000 allocated in general fund dollars, I mean, I think 110 for these two programs to get through the winter and to get this going before the beginning of the year, before we have to work through the RFP process getting going, and before we wait for full approval, which based on y'all's mini Gantt chart there, which I know Jim would love, may contemplate us out all the way to March of 21. I mean, if we have some funds budgeted in this year's budget that are general fund dollars that are ready to be deployed to something like this, and we have organizations that are ready to do the work, I would be fully supportive of going ahead and allocating those dollars and letting them get off the ground and actually start doing the work while we go through the RFP process for the CDBG portion of it.
So one of the things that I want to,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, go ahead.
I agree too. My only concern is that I want to make sure that somebody's got to be working with all of these entities to make sure that we're not duplicating, processes and efforts, and that leads to confusion and people don't know where to go to and how to, well, I went to this and it's supposed to be this, and and I don't know if that comes from us. I don't know where that comes from, but I can foresee, too many cooks spoiling a pot. I mean, and while I absolutely see the benefits of every level of creating access to capital, I do. I want to make, the one thing I want to say is, in all of these efforts, if we can guarantee that there is a connector, some sort of conduit through it all, so that we can make sure that, these organizations, and we don't have to hold their hands, but we need to make sure that we create a culture of communication, and create a culture that is, inclusive in everybody, because you're not competing for people. We're trying to help and aid as many people as possible. And I think that if we do it all and do it right, we can really make an impact in the fact that we have been so negligent in creating access to capital and pathways to entrepreneurship in the past. It's not a bad problem that we have, but I do want to make sure that we do it correctly.
Talking with your hands and cut off your video.
I'm on my phone, unfortunately, and I'm never on it, and it rained.
No, I agree with that. And I think, my understanding is that we have the contract negotiated already with the CDFI, and we may need a little more work to do on Kiva. Is that accurate, Bradley?
I think that's a fair way to say it.
I'd like to see us move this forward at the council meeting and let staff work on this as quickly as they can to get both of these stood up. And I mean, to me, I understand Andrea's concern. They do seem to be complementary and not competitive with each other to a great extent, based on the way that John Kennard discussed it and the graphics that are shown.
So, and I know the contract with CDFI, but with Kiva, if we can get some information to you that y'all might want, can that be on the same agenda, or is that what you're saying, or do you need more information on that? We're happy to get what you need, and as well, the average loan is, we don't even need the full 50 immediately. It's just as the loans come on, which probably will start after the beginning of the year, just having access to that pool to be able to go out and find a corporate, and say, hey, the city's providing some matching funds. And again, at 6,000 an average, when we do 10, that'd be only, that we're matching half of that, it's, $30,000. So I don't even envision us pulling down that full 50 for this first cohort. And it gives us some leverage to go and find a bank or somebody with CRA dollars they're looking to deploy that's saying that it has some support as well. But I defer to y'all. I just, I'm like to see this go, but if we need to wait, that's okay.
It's, Startup Waco is certainly an important partner organization for us. These are very reputable groups that we're talking about, the Kaufman Foundation, and being able to leverage our money with their money is significant. It sounded to me like staff needed a little more information on Kiva. So I don't know whether we can get it done on the same agenda, but maybe we can get it done either on that one or one very quickly after that.
We'll do our best, Mayor.
Okay. So everybody good with that? We definitely need to answer the questions regarding Spanish language access to this. Okay. Is that the direction you need, Bradley?
Yes, sir. We appreciate y'all's time and interest on that item.
Okay, thank you, Deidre. I'm very excited to see both these programs and the good that they can do for our small business.
Thank you.
All right. Mayor, Council, we've got one more presentation this afternoon. It's a discussion and update on the request for proposals process, RFP process for a website content management system and design services. We're welcoming Mike Seawright, our Chief Information Officer, and Dory Helm, our Assistant Director of Municipal Information, to the table to lead that discussion. Obviously, a strong website is a critical piece of a strategic communications effort, and it's a primary way that people receive information, access our meetings, and seek understanding about the city. I appreciate Mike stepping in and leading this effort and really bringing new energy to the discussion, and I'll invite him to kick off the presentation at this point.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is a very exciting project, and we appreciate this opportunity to review our goals and project plan for this initiative. Before we start, I want to give you a quick definition of what a content management system is. A content management system is a website authoring, collaboration, and administration tool to help users create websites and manage web applications from anywhere. You no longer have to be a programmer or know HTML to develop websites within a modern content management system. As we look to acquire a new content management system, we will support a new website that will support a new website design and mobile-friendly website. We are very excited about the city government-specific solutions that we have looked at. In addition, as we have set IT strategy, an IT strategy that supports the idea of a web-enabled city and a mobile-first strategy for our customers, we are focused on improving the overall user experience and delivering a self-service, mobile-friendly, and 24/7, 365 customer-focused solution. In this day and time, the user experience is critical, and this project will give us an opportunity to enable a content management system and website design that is specifically designed to support the various business units at the City of Waco. As we started to move through this project, it was clear that we needed to formalize this initiative into a project charter and document our goals for success. With this project, planning will be fluid, and our goals and project plan will change based on feedback from our stakeholders and the solutions that we consider. I'm sorry. Okay. Dory and I started this process with a small group of power users from the City of Waco to evaluate and demo a few of the leading content management systems in this space. Based on those meetings.
Frozen this time?
Yeah.
All right, we can hear you again now.
Where did you lose us, Mayor? The first slide?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe so.
Slide one.
Thank you.
We'll regroup.
As we started to move through this project, it was clear that we needed to formalize this initiative into a project charter and document our goals.
Is it gonna start over?
I think maybe go one back. Let's see.
We don't see the presentation now.
Oh, wow.
Got some gremlins today.
Yeah, we do.
Hmm.
We share the screen. Share.
There you go.
There we go.
Must have restarted.
Okay. Well, I'll let you look at these goals that we have set, and I've got a couple of slides there, but as we started to move through this project, it was clear that we needed to formalize this initiative into a project charter and document our goals for success. With this project, planning will be fluid, and our goals and project plan will change based on feedback from our stakeholders. Dory and I started this process about 3 months ago with a small group of power users from the City of Waco to evaluate and demo a few of the leading content management systems in this space. Based on those meetings and input from our power users, we created an initial list of goals. And as you look at these goals, the user experience, like I've said, is critical. A mobile-first approach towards everything we do will be important. And Dory would talk about stats around mobile usage on our website, creating efficiencies for all of our users, and integrating with existing systems will be critical as well. But the one that jumps out there is that citizen engagement process and applications to fully have a fully baked system that will engage your citizens. This next set of goals that we've talked about here, the first one there is just to make sure that we adopt a content management system that is government specific. There are some really good solutions out there that lend themselves to city business and delivering applications to serve to city government. We have a great story to tell, so to make sure we select a solution that allows us and gives us leading edge solutions to deliver our story. The third one there, empower our departments and stakeholders to make sure that departments and users can manage their website presence will also be critical. And the last one there is to be able to measure everything that we do with our website. Data and reporting is important, and just to make sure that whatever solution we select has those tools. This next slide will show you some of the advanced features that we will make sure that we get with the solution. And it's just a few of them. It's not all inclusive. Citizen request tracker, an e-commerce solution, online forums, news and announcements, multilingual support, which I know is important for us, the ability to enable e-notifications for people to subscribe to listservs, SMS text messaging, things like that. Content scheduling, the ability to automate content delivery, and advanced calendaring and directory. But this is just a small list of features that we hope to get with the new content management system.
Hello all. So just a little bit about our current site. The design that we have now is a hybrid between just a static site and a CMS site. So what we're moving towards is full CMS. So 30 users are on the back end using it all of the time. So we have to make sure that internally and externally we pick something that's very, very easy to use. So just a little bit by way of statistics, the site that we have now has been pretty reliable over the course of about a decade. It has really had virtually no downtime. And at the beginning, we were pretty cutting edge with it. But as Mike said, you know, in the past 5 years, there have just been some really cool options that have come out for government that we're really excited. I mean, picture a big smile under this mask. We're really excited about. And so in 2019, just some background for you, the stats that we had were 2.8 million page views. That's multiple page views by a user, which is pretty high for a government site. Currently, right now, we have passed that because of COVID. I think that tells us that people know where to go for the information. 61% are mobile users, and that continues to grow every year. So, of course, mobile is a big one. We have to make sure that we are completely mobile friendly, and we are now, but we're going to make it even better. iPhone is the big winner. So, sorry, Android users. No, we cater to Android as well, but iPhone is always in the majority. 69% of our users don't type in waco-texas.com. They type in Waco, Texas, Waco Engineering. So that makes our Google listings very, very important. And we maintain those as well. But we need to make sure that when Google pulls information out of our site, it's accurate with good pictures. So you can hop to the next one, Mike. And then this is just kind of a screenshot of the stats that we track. We track a lot more than just mobile and how many people hit the site. We can pull anything out, and this will help us build an effective site going forward because we want to lead with the most valuable information. So this is just kind of to show that if there's anything in question or anything you wonder about how much use it gets, we could always pull it out. So that's just kind of the nutshell version. So it will lead design going forward.
This next slide here talks about the project charter and the RFP. We have already started the process of formalizing this project, and I think we shared that out with you. The two most important aspects of a project plan, I think, for this project will be the change management and communications management part of it. The website has been pretty stagnant for quite some time now, and so that link that you've always clicked on for all these years, if that's gone, we got to make sure we communicate that change, make sure that we communicate often, make sure that all of our stakeholders are aware of what we're doing. Probably throw a soft launch in there as well as we move through that design. And then on the RFP, we hope to get the RFP out in November and select a solution in December. And this is kind of a very basic timeline for the project. This will be a massive project for the city. And we hope to complete the project within a 12-month span. In a previous life, I've gone through this several times, and it's been as quick as 6 months and sometimes out to a couple years. And so it will be a big undertaking, but one that we think is critical for the city. That will take questions.
No questions, but I hope it takes months rather than years.
We do too.
Yeah, no questions here either, but it looks like it's well planned out. Even had kind of a quasi Gantt chart in there too, so I'm happy.
Anybody else?
Nope, looks good. That's the more robust, user friendly, and capable our online presence is, the better. So I think this tied in with OpenGov and some other things we're working on will be able to provide some real benefits to both staff and our citizens.
Good deal.
Couldn't have said it.
Great. Mike and Dory, thank you for the presentation. It just requires constant innovation with our communication, and I appreciate the fact that y'all are taking this on, and look forward to seeing the results.
Thank you.
Mayor, I think that's all we had for you.
Okay. Are there any requests for future agenda items? The next regularly scheduled meeting will be November 10th at 2020, I guess at 1:30 p.m. If there's no other business, we will adjourn this meeting at 3:13 p.m. Thank y'all.